Welcome. I'm so glad you guys came to join us. I am so excited to introduce Linda Murphy. She is one of my idols. I will not lie. I love her books. They took these gigantic concepts that I was learning about while taking the relationship development intervention course and made them so dead simple that you can follow them. They were these foreign topics that I kind of wrapped my head around, but it wasn't until I actually read her books did I go, oh, I can apply this to like this and almost everything in my life in a way that made sense to me. So if you haven't checked out her books, please do. So I don't want to run the show here. I'm just going to let Linda take charge here and tell us a little bit about how she found RDI, what she loves about it, and then maybe we'll step into a little bit of co-regulation, just because that's where everything starts. Without co-regulation, we don't have a relationship, we don't have communication, we don't have any learning. So it's really where it starts.
Yeah.
So I'll hand it over.
Well, for me, I'm a speech language pathologist first. And I think I was working in early intervention probably for like, I think 7 years, 6 or 7 years. And it's and I came across relationship development in working with a family who, I actually talk about this little girl in my book. Her real name is Lena, but in the book she's Eliza. And I met her when she was maybe 16 months, right before she got a diagnosis of autism. And I was with her for many years, but as she approached 3, her parents were just feeling like, she's gained language skills, or even at the time, like, we didn't necessarily have the vocabulary for it, but she had a lot of static skills, like the academic stuff, things that you could memorize. But she wasn't yet able to really engage in authentic reciprocal exchanges without a lot of support or prompting. And even it seemed at times that she didn't want to engage, like it was very fleeting, or it seemed like she was avoiding interactions. And, I was just a bright little girl. And so her parents were just wanting to know how to kind of get to that next level. And they found out about RDI and told me about it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is everything that I don't know and want to know how to do it. And so I became, through that process, did the RDI training. They were my first family, my supervision family. And I feel like it just turned everything like upside down, but in a really, really good way. Because prior to that, I had spent a lot of time, I knew my speech language stuff, but with kids with a diagnosis of autism, ABA is pretty big where I am. So I was alongside ABA therapists. And just sometimes, like, what they were doing, I wanted to respect it, but at the same time, I knew it wasn't who I was as a clinician. But I didn't necessarily have permission to do things in a different way, because I felt greener back then and didn't necessarily have a different training. Although, I came from Barry Prezant and his work, he was one of my teachers in graduate school. So I had it in me, but I didn't necessarily yet have the confidence or the vocabulary to like strongly steer in a direction that felt better to me. And then once I trained in RDI, I was like, oh, this totally makes sense. And it switched everything that I did, not just with kids with social learning differences, but also just other maybe learning difficulties or differences. And even just typical kids, it just changes how you communicate and how you think about things. So that's my story. And that was back in 2007, 2008. And so I've just been an RDI consultant since then. And I guess the books came to be just because I got tired of just like talking about declarative language all the time and trying to help people understand it. And, I have little articles that I've written, but I was like, this is just such a no-brainer for me. And it's not hard to do if people want to think about what they're saying, but there wasn't a good resource out there yet to just be like, here, this is what I'm talking about. This is why it makes sense.
Yeah,
So that's kind of why I wrote the first book. Yeah.
yeah, after like I totally second that. Like I'm trained as an SLPA, an OTA, and a PTA, but there was always this missing piece in the
Mm-hmm.
puzzle, or like in like, and I too worked alongside ABA and was kind of told that I had to do what I was told. I wasn't supposed to think for myself, for lack of better words.
Uh-huh.
And I just found that they only knew their profession, but because I'm triple trained, I saw the bigger picture. And so, but then I can also relate to how your little articles were great and little light bulbs turned on, but it wasn't until I had like the declarative language handbook in front of me did it make sense. And like I say,
Mm-hmm.
could I start applying it on a regular basis? But I do agree that it takes that time and space to be like, I have to think about it. You have to practice it for a little while before it becomes like that second nature to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And then I ended up writing the second book just because I realized I wasn't finished yet, because questions for declarative language might be like, well, what do you do when it doesn't work, or it
Right.
doesn't always work, which I'm like, I agree, it doesn't always work. But in my head and from my RDI training, I just know that, like, pulling correlation right away when the declarative language isn't enough, or vice versa. So that made me realize I just had to get that second book out there, because even when I'm working with with families doing RDI, I feel like those are always the first two concepts that we practice, is co-regulation and declarative language, depending on who they are and which one will be more powerful for them. So
Yeah.
those are my two go-tos constantly. Yeah.
For sure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because it just, like you say, depends on the child. Some kids, if they, like in Kelly's case, her son doesn't have a lot of language, but co-regulation is going to be huge. And
Mm-hmm.
then, but other ones have a large amount of language, but they're missing that other piece. So it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of this game of like, which one do we use first, or how can we use them together? Because ideally, we want to be able to use them together.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know if does anyone. Oh, Sydney wants to say hello. Okay.
Or raise her hand for a question, maybe.
Sure. Sydney, I've asked to unmute you, so you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Sydney.
Linda. I'm so pumped to meet you.
Ah, thank you.
So I have a question, just kind of based on what you were talking about feeling like you had a way that you wanted to be, but you didn't feel like it was working with the people that you were working with.
Mm-hmm.
So often I feel that way too, and I support kids, and so I've had cases where I've been being observed, and I'm using declarative language, and the response that I'll get is sort of like, they kind of laugh me off when I use a declarative language. Like, for instance, what are our friends doing right now? Oh, I see that, Jesse's getting his backpack. What do you think that could mean? Like, we're like getting ready to go inside, for instance. And so I just was wondering, how do I explain that? Like, how, as a
Mm-hmm.
support worker, then do I say to someone who is practicing ABA, how can I say, like, what's the best way for me to respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think like what it comes down to is the goals that you're targeting. Like, what is it they're targeting versus what are you targeting?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is I think sometimes maybe we are targeting the same thing, but it's more, it's obviously in a different way, where I
Mm-hmm.
want him or her to be to have that observation piece, whereas they want them to just have the do as you're told piece.
Yeah. So your goals are different. Like, I feel like, so
Okay.
what you're saying is they're
Totally.
working on him moving through the sequence of expected actions.
Yes.
Whereas you're working on problem solving and independently reading the environment to figure out on his own. Like, you're working toward independence. They're working toward
Compliance.
following directions. And it's
Right.
not to say following directions is bad to work on. It's just,
Yeah.
which are you going for, and what's your priority at that moment in time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of that that feeling though that you get where
Hmm.
there's that dynamic between, say, me and another person, where it's like I can kind of feel that there's a judgment, and I never know
Hmm.
how to sort of come at that with an invitation, instead of a feeling like I'm on the hot seat and I have to explain what I'm doing.
Yeah. Do you feel like you have space to have those conversations with them?
I think it depends on the person. Yeah.
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 I know, like it can be hard to have those conversations in the moment when you're supporting a child,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
outside of the moment. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
like it's hard to explain all that's going on in your brain
Yeah.
in the moment that you're also trying to
Exactly.
support
Yeah.
a child, because you don't
Yeah.
want to over talk, or you want to be mindful of the what the child's doing in the moment and give them space. Um, and is it your clinical space that they're entering, or is it shared space?
It's so I support kids in preschool programs. So this will
Mm-hmm.
be, say, someone who's usually it's someone who's coming from an ABA center to sort of
Mm-hmm.
see how he's doing in our program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's your space,
Hmm.
right? And so you can create boundaries around it. And I think part of that could be space to talk after the fact, so you can share or follow up on any questions they might have. Because I think the hardest part is like you're doing it, but if you don't have time to explain your thought process,
Hmm.
then they're not
Hmm.
going to walk away perceiving the importance of or the depth of what you're doing, you
Right.
know? So
Yeah.
because they're coming to your turf and your space, is it possible to say, okay, yeah, we'd love for you to come. You can observe. Like, we ask that you don't interrupt, so that, you know, we can maintain our communicative style and
Hmm.
create spaces for learning that we know. But then it's also really important for us to talk to you after, so that you take away the pieces that we think are important, that you know, so that we can answer any questions you might have about why we did something,
Hmm.
you know, or even say to them, like, we'd love, while you're observing, for you to think of any questions you might have about why I'm choosing to use certain language, why at times I may not be talking, you know, recognize how, you know I might be doing some things that are different than you're doing. I would love to talk about that on the other side.
Hmm.
I think that's the piece you need, is just space to share
And
information.
how did you learn how to do that in the very beginning? Like, how can you talk
Mhm.
about that process for you? Because I'm sure,
Yeah.
as you said, you felt like, I know that this isn't how I want to be. Like, how did you get really confident with that?
Yeah. I think, so do you mean like even for your, well, I think it very much like depends kind of on, like, I know I'm using turf, but like if someone's coming to my space, I can set
Hmm.
whatever boundaries I want. If I'm going to someone else's space, then I have to be respectful of their boundaries.
Right.
Um, so it varies. Like, if somebody's coming to your space and you set it up over email, for example, you could put all that in writing. Like, I would love,
Hmm.
here's our expectation while you're observing. And it's really important that at least 15 minutes of your observation is at the end, where we just have time to talk, or we set up a Zoom after, so we can just explain the process of how we're supporting the child, you know, that sort of thing.
Hmm. Great.
And I would say, like, and on the other end, like, if you're going to somebody else's space, it's just tricky, because you want to be respectful. And I think if you go in too hard, too fast, and then other professionals feel defensive, and you're not going to create that open communication environment that you
Hmm.
want.
Hmm.
So that's where I feel like I try to be respectful and look for openings where they might feel safe enough to ask me a question about, like, if I think of something different, or if I'm approaching something different, or I try and figure out how to phrase something, like, you know, find common ground, but then also share an expansion about how I might approach something differently. Um,
Right.
you know, it's like, you don't want another professional to feel guarded or defensive, because then
Yeah.
that's going to stop any collaboration that you might get to. And I think just consider like it's a journey, like all of this, like you're not going to change somebody's style overnight, but if you can plant seeds of curiosity about declarative language, like, and then that professional might go on their own learning journey to figure out more because you planted the seeds, you know.
Right.
So maybe
Yeah.
think of it that way, like I just want to plant seeds and help them know that there's a different way to do this.
That's really cool. I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Because I think too, at the beginning, like in learning about RDI, like I was just so relieved that there was a different way that felt better to me. And then I was the one that just like, you know, drove my own learning because I was like, this is what I don't know. This is what I need to know. But I feel like that's how a lot of people come to RDI, you know, where they're like, I was doing ABA, but it's because I didn't know anything different. And as soon as I did, I was like, oh, thank goodness. And yeah, let's learn about that. So you could even consider yourself really just an important role in introducing people to a different way, you know. So you want to, like in that way, you want to be supportive, kind, respectful, so that they have good thoughts about our work and want to be curious and learn about more, versus guarded or defensive about all that they've learned so far.
Very cool. Thank you.
It's such a good question, though.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
thank
hard when
you.
it's hard to be kind of first learning about RDI and then implementing it and then understanding how to explain it. That's what I struggle with, is like, just, I haven't done it long enough or read enough about it. I'm just starting, so it's hard to explain it.
Totally. It's very hard to explain.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's like your goals are different and your lens is different. And when you are in the same room talking with them, it's just, well, I know you're thinking about following one-step directions, and that's terrific. But when I'm with them, here are some things that I'm thinking about and how I'm going about that.
Yeah.
So
I like that language. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's what I need. Like just those little like ways to say stuff.
Yeah. I remember one time, sorry not to go on and on, but I remember one time, like I was working with a parent and her son got a lot of ABA, and I was just like thinking about episodic memory and problem solving and like these things, and she was just seeing the behavior, like he was upset about something, but I'm thinking about resilience and giving him time and space to recover on his own. And I had emailed her after, because same thing, like I felt that judgment, like, oh, she doesn't like what I'm doing because he's having a behavior. But meanwhile, I'm thinking of all these other things, because she was viewing it through the behavioral lens of his ABA therapist. And then I wrote like an email to this mom just to explain my thought process and how it's different from what her behavior therapist might be thinking. And she just wrote back like, wow, yeah, you guys are thinking about totally different things. And that was enough, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So amazing.
Is my like partner in crime over here. We ran into each other at one point at a play center, both supporting kids, and she's just we just aligned with the approaches we were taking, and neither of us knew anything at that point about RDI or any of this stuff. We just knew that that's not what we wanted to, like, our approach was way more relationship based, watching where the child was at, meeting them, and just be like, we just enjoyed being with them. And allowing things to come up and arise, and those learning opportunities as they came, and not manufacture them at this play center, because it was like just a drop-in play center. So Sydney has spent a fair amount of time. Every time I got one of your books, I was like, Sydney, you need to read this. And but can we just take a step back, because this sounds like a lot of work, and I know I have some parents that are feeling like a little overwhelmed right now. So when we think of RDI and we talk about engaging your kid on a regular basis, that sounds scary. That sounds like a lot of work. So I know you have a really great way of showing parents that it's bigger in their head than it necessarily has to be every day.
Yeah. Well, I think that the more that I, like, since I wrote the book, the more I'm just talking about these concepts with families that maybe don't do the whole RDI program but want to get started, I feel like my mantra now is just one opportunity at a time. And that's all you have to really think about. And opportunities can be 3 minutes long. And that's it. Like, because the really and truly, like, the little moments build up over time. So I think if you feel like you have to do everything or sit down with the child for a half hour or an hour at a time, and you feel like that's going to be hard, then it's going to be negative for everybody, and you're just not going to get started, or you're not going to want to keep going.
And I don't know very many kids who could at the beginning sit for half an hour anyway and focus and
Yeah.
engage with us anyway. Right?
Yeah. And so I just think in terms of an opportunity, or one opportunity at a time, maybe if it's co-regulation, or one exchange at a time if it's declarative language. Like, that's all you got to worry about. Just like one exchange at a time. And I've been doing like a declarative language workshop with families who don't do RDI but just want to figure out this declarative language and co-regulation piece. And they share clips. So I'm sure, like, Kat, you've seen, different clips from families, but some of them literally, like, they're 2 minutes, 3 minutes long, that's it. And there's so much goodness, so much learning that happens, like moments of problem solving. And so I always really try to point that out to families, like, this is 3 minutes of your time, and look how much was accomplished and how confident the child felt in the problem solving that he had the opportunity to do, or what he learned. So it's all about just having your radar on, I think, for opportunities where you could include your child. So something, one that just happened last week was, just putting books on a shelf or straightening books on a shelf. And a mom said she usually does it herself just to get it done quickly, but she chose that as her homework. She spent 3 minutes with her son while they put books back on the bookshelf. And it was just amazing, like, so much good stuff in 3 minutes.
And I think that's the big thing that I try to convey a lot too, is that we're not adding things to your day, we're adding value to the things you're already doing.
Yeah.
You're already doing laundry, you're already taking out the garbage, I remember in one of the books, I'm not sure which one, I think it was Co-Regulation, you talk about putting the sheets on the bed. And how you did it a couple of times with your boys, and then a few times later, after a few practices, they could do it by themselves.
Right.
Right. So it's those things that are naturally going to happen in your day.
Right.
And it's that mindfulness piece of being like, oh, I can include my son or my daughter with me, like, in this activity.
Yep. And doing it, like, at a time that you feel ready and able, like, not when you feel stressed or rushed or you're trying to get out the door. Those aren't good opportunities.
Yeah, and don't feel like you have to fill your whole day with every opportunity. You can just choose 1 or 2 a day. It doesn't have to be like, oh, that was an opportunity, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that one.
Right. Yep. And they build on each other. And I think you walk away with positive memories. You feel confident. The child feels confident. You want to come back for more, and you keep learning in that way.
That's a really great point, though, is to highlight that this is a learning process for us as the adults and the guides and the parents, just as much as it is for the kids. So we have to give ourselves a little grace, because even I look back at some of the videos that when I work with some of the kids, and I'm like, oh, I could have said that. Oh, I should have done. Do you know what I mean? But I can't be on top of my game every minute of every second of every engagement. I just have to practice and hope that each time it'll get a little better, or a little, I'll use more declarative language, or take more opportunity to co-regulate with a kiddo.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just talk about co-regulation, because I'm not sure how many people are even familiar with what that is and how it works, why it's so important.
Yeah. Where would you like to start? Do you want me to talk about it as I talk about it? Or
sure. Yeah, let's I love the way that you explain it in the book, at least. It just makes sense.
Yeah, like co-regulation, if you had to think of, like, maybe one word to get started, is just the idea of letting go of feeling like you have to control an outcome, and just being present in the moment. That's kind of the first thing. But then the way I think about it and the way I explain it in the book is co-regulation is just when two people are acting contingently moment to moment, and an interaction unfolds, and it's not predetermined, so you don't know where co-regulation or a co-regulatory exchange is going to end up, because you're acting contingently moment to moment. So what you do is based on what happened immediately before, and so on. So I think that's the first piece, is just learning to be present and let go. And easier places to practice it could be even in conversation, like if it's a child that's talking, or even noticing it, for example, in a conversation with a friend. Like you might notice, you don't necessarily think about what you're going to say 2 exchanges ahead. You just hear your friend and then respond contingently, and they respond contingently to you. So you just let go and are present in the moment. And then, so co-regulation can be language, so that would be like an authentic conversation, but then it can also be actions, where I do something and then you do something contingent or related. So like one analogy might be a game of catch, where we're throwing a ball back and forth, and like I'm not controlling what you're doing, and you could throw the ball at any speed, in any manner, in any direction, and my job is just to get it and then toss it back to you, and we keep going. So that could be an example, or even early on ones could be peekaboo with a baby, where like a mom could, or a dad could put a cloth over their face, and then the baby pulls it off and they continue it on. So there's a pattern, but there's contingency, and then there's a lot of freedom within each person's role. Like you both know what the pattern is that you're doing, but nobody controls the other person. And then I think as we move into RDI and think about like how to do this across opportunities, the keywords that always stick in my head are, you want to create competent, authentic, contingent roles. So you want, as you're thinking about doing anything in particular. So if we go back to the bookshelf example, you may say, for example, you want to think of something that might be a 1-person job, and then carve it into 2 jobs, into a 2-person job, where you assign, you imagine contingent roles. So I have a job, you have a job, and they're both real because you're doing this task that's real. And you want to be sure to assign the child a role that they can be competent in. And for me, competent means they can do it independently for the most part, as long as you give them enough time to do it. So they might need a little bit more time to do it, but they can still do it pretty much independently, or maybe just like with a teeny bit of help. So the bookshelf example might be, and even the one that I was referring to earlier, the mom handed her son a book and then he put it on the shelf. And they continued on like through a series of books. Like as they got going, she would hand him 2 books at a time because he was ready for it. So it changed. There was some variations. And I think like just when you get into that contingency or that pattern with your child where they have a competent role, they sustain engagement. Like when I was talking about Eliza, like initially engagements or our baseline video with her, like her attention was so fragile and fleeting, but it was because her parents didn't yet know how to create that contingency or that competent role. But once they figured that out, her engagement sustained over long periods of time. It's just that she didn't know what her role is, or her parents didn't yet think about how to create a competent role for her that was contingent on theirs. But once that framework was in place, everything changed.
And it's that feeling of being a part of something, right? Like I can't do my job or you can't do your job. They're depending on me, and it creates that relationship that like, and it can be fun. It doesn't have to be all serious. It's just like now they feel empowered. They're like, oh, I'm really helping, or I'm really doing something. And then you might be doing one step and giving them a little bit more of it, like changing it up. And then all of a sudden they start doing it by themselves because they're like, I've seen you do it enough. I've got this. I want to show you I can do this. Right? So you just see them light up when they catch on to the next step, and they're like, then they have this positive feeling, and they want to do more. they want to do the next thing with you.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like the framework that then leads to great things, or the foundation that allows you to get to great things.
And when you don't have an end point in mind, it opens it up to become wherever it might lead, somewhere that you never even imagined. It could be way better than that end point you had originally thought that you wanted to get to. It could just move in some other direction, and it could be a whole different learning opportunity than the one maybe you had originally intended on. But if you were open enough for it to allow it to happen. So we've talked for about half an hour, and it's been a little bit of stuff to take in. I want to open it up and see if anyone else has any questions. No? Yes? Kelly, you're doing all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm enjoying listening to you guys.
I'm not sure. Is there anything else that you like pressing that you really want to share, Linda?
Well, I could just thanks for letting me talk so much. I'm like, clearly I could go on and on about all this stuff. But I was thinking, like I know I already said this, but like letting go, like even as a speech therapist, entering sessions and just letting, like I know generally like things that I might want kids to learn, but if I let go of how we get there and give them an authentic part in the process, like that feels good and competent to them. Like we get there, but we also have fun in there and they feel good. Whereas when you try and control things too much, nobody has fun.
I totally get that. Like I come with my bag of stuff.
Yeah.
But sometimes the kids don't want to do anything in my bag, and they want to do something in their room, or they want to do something outside. Like today, the boys were like, well, we thought we wanted to play a game, but it's really nice. We want to go to the water park. Oh, all right. At least I happen to have the water park stuff still in the back of my car, but it was nice to just be like, okay, I can still, whatever comes up, we can work with it. And then they're like, really? We can go to the water park? We don't have to do the plan that we set out last week? I'm like, no, I'm flexible. It's a beautiful day. Let's go see what happens at the water park.
Yeah.
And it was just, it's really empowering for them. And it was actually really empowering for me, because there was so many opportunities that came up with kids in a natural situation where I could help guide. Oh, they made a funny face, and just help them work through it on their own.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Go for it, Sydney.
Well, just more to the feeling of being overwhelmed. Like that's sort of how I felt when we first started talking about RDI and stuff. And so what Kat said is, like you say to parents, like just pick one thing that you do with your kiddo during the day. And so for me, that I decided that I really want him to feel like he's part of the group. So when we're coming in from outside, I want him to feel like he's making that choice because he sees everyone else doing it and he's part of the group, and that it's not me singling him out and directing him. Okay, we're going inside. And so that was the only thing that I decided, like I wasn't going to do any work inside with RDI or any of that stuff because it felt too overwhelming. And so that's the only thing I did. And within, I would say 4 times of him being with me and using declarative language, just with regards to coming inside on his own accord, because he's aware of what's going on around him, he did it. And he's observant about us being outside. And when the kids start moving towards the door, he knows what's going on. He does it all by himself. I don't have to ask him to get his backpack. Like 4 times of me just being like, hey, like, what are the kids doing? Or, using that declarative language for him to just become more aware of his surroundings. So yeah, so I just was like 4 times. What? Like now now I've completely empowered you, and you can feel more a part of the group, and you don't feel singled out, and you don't feel like I'm in control of your body. And like, I just was like, okay, this is great.
So now he's like reading the room on his own or noticing on his own. And
yeah,
that's amazing. See,
I
that's what you were
know.
going for, independence.
Yeah, and I really like the idea that from you and from Kat of just, okay, like just pick one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It does,
there's
because it
always
can
going to
get
be something that
overwhelming
you
when you're
always
like,
do.
sorry.
There's always
Yeah,
going to be
something you
something that
always
you
do.
always do, right?
Yeah.
Like you say,
Mhm.
you're always going to be outside and have to come in.
Yeah.
For some families, they're always going to have to put their shoes on. We're
Yeah.
always going to have to get dressed in the morning,
Mhm.
right? So because you're right, Sydney, like you have to start thinking about, you have to start pre-planning a little bit at the beginning just to wrap your head about like, oh, how would I go about this
Mhm.
in this moment, for sure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I like the idea, like you say, like something you always have to do, like you're going to be doing it every day. And
Mhm.
that's just, you decide this is the only thing I'm going to use it for to start. And so, and like, it doesn't feel overwhelming at all.
Mhm.
And then you just move on to the next thing.
Right.
That's
Totally.
a great one, Sydney. And then
Yeah,
I wonder
yeah.
how much he observes in other parts of the day when the other children are moving, like from circle time or different things that he might be able to relate
He's
from
transferring that.
being outside.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool.
Mhm. You empowered that little guy. Good job.
I am so glad that you came. I am sorry about the whole link issue and not having it up on Everbright, but it's a learning opportunity. I know for next time.
Mhm.
I don't want to keep you. I know it's really late, Linda. So
Oh, that's okay.
I'll leave this last little bit up to you. If you have some more words of wisdom, or if you just want to say goodnight, I will make sure that when this recording goes out, your website goes up, because I know that there will probably be some parents who might be interested in just the declarative language course and
Mhm.
different things, so that they can have that. And
Yeah.
and I'm just so grateful that you came to join us.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to come back. I'm glad that what a nice parent group you have. So good job just getting people together. Everybody has such good experiences and stories. And I find like I just always continue to learn, I always can just learn so much from other people all the time. Like every family, every child is different, and always just, I keep getting to think of things in new and different ways as I think, we see families execute the ideas in different ways that are unique to them. So like even one fun example was in our workshop a couple of months ago, one co-regulatory pattern that a parent created was putting the chickens in the coop for the night because they lived down in Texas and had chickens. So again, it was like 3 minutes, but she and her daughter worked together to, be the hander of the chicken and the placer of the chicken. And I was like, this is my first chicken coop, co-regulation. And I love it. It's so cool.
I bet you do see some really interesting things. I love that story.
Yeah, well, and I think co-regulation, like once you kind of internalize the idea, you see it everywhere. So that's what I like about it too. It's not hard to learn. It's just have your radar on for opportunities. And then once you've got the concept, like competent, authentic, contingent role, there's nothing that you can't do. Once you kind of get the bug and know how it goes and feel confident in it, the more you do it, the more you feel comfortable with it. The more you do it, the more comfortable you feel when there's a breakdown, things go awry. You get confident in how to make a repair and know that it's like no big deal. It's not scary, but it's all good skills that you get to hone.
And it's definitely not your fault or your child's fault, right? It just didn't work, and that's okay.
Right.
I think that's a huge part of it, is being like, ideally this is how this should work, but it, like, even in our conversations as adults, we have breakdowns all the time. You see this look on my face.
Right.
Like, I don't quite get that. So like those things happen even to us as adults, and for some reason we seem to think that children should just be able to do it.
Right. But even just that act of practicing breakdowns and repairs is important, an important
Mhm.
skill. Like, how do you repair? How do you notice a breakdown and how do you repair it?
For
Mhm.
sure.
So that in and of itself is a skill. So there are opportunities. When
There's
it doesn't
endless
go as planned,
opportunities.
it's an opportunity, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Linda.
Yeah,
And I
thank you
and
so
I
much.
hope in a couple months maybe I can have you back again and we
Yeah,
can chat again.
definitely. Anytime. Nice
Thanks,
to meet
guys.
everybody.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, Kat.